Welcome, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the U.S. side event as part of the 64th Annual IAEA General Conference meeting. Before we start our program, I would like to inform you that this WebEx call is being recorded and may be posted on DOE's website or used internally. If you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not speak during the call. If you do not wish to have your image recorded, please turn off your camera or participate by phone. If you speak during the call or use a video connection, you are presumed consent to recording and use of your voice or image. Thank you for adhering to that policy. So now, welcome everyone. We are so glad that you could join us today. We have a very distinguished panel of speakers who will join us today. I'll tell you a bit about them as we get to their part on the agenda. The title of our session is Advanced Nuclear Reactors. The time is now. So today we'll hear from a variety of speakers in both government and industry about why the time is now. To get us started, I'd like to introduce the Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy, Dr. Rita Baranwal, who will provide our welcoming remarks. Dr. Baranwal.
Great. Thank you, Alicia, and thank you all for attending this special side event on U.S. reactor technologies, flexible energy security for real-world challenges. Can you hear me okay? Very good. One thing I've learned over our 6 months here working through webinars. I would like to also extend a very special thank you to all of our participants who will inform us on how U.S. reactor technologies can address real-world challenges and provide a perspective on the global situation. Despite the many challenges the world is facing, there is so much to look forward to. The advances in technology and opportunities it provides to address humanity's challenges are absolutely breathtaking. The time to act to improve the world around us is right now. I want to highlight with you all how nuclear energy can address these challenges and its importance to our energy needs, economic prosperity, and environmental sustainability. I view nuclear energy as crucial to ensuring the sustainability of our environment now and into the future. Nuclear energy is the United States' largest source of clean, reliable, and resilient electricity, generating about 20% of the electricity in the United States and over 55% of its clean energy. Nuclear energy currently produces nearly 1/3 of the world's non-emitting electricity, making it the second leading source of emission-free power generation globally. And it also operates reliably 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Many countries see nuclear energy as a means to meeting their energy demand and growth, supporting their clean energy goals, and providing energy diversity and security, just as we do here in the United States. I'm confident that the United States nuclear energy technologies can and will play a major role in providing the United States and the world with clean, reliable energy for decades to come. Nuclear energy is revolutionary beyond just electricity generation. It can provide low-emission energy for water desalination to achieve worldwide water security. It can decarbonize the industrial sector with process heat. It can decarbonize the transportation sector with hydrogen and electrification. And, of course, it can better humankind by way of medical applications and space exploration. New advanced nuclear reactors have the potential to solve the diverse challenges across our nation as well as across the globe. To help emerging or expanding nuclear countries understand the issues involved in nuclear power operations, the U.S. government can facilitate interactions using our strategic partnerships with U.S. designers to better understand their products and how their capabilities can be compatible with their energy needs. Countries can prepare for these advanced designs by participating in IAEA programs that are designed to help newcomer countries develop an understanding of the requirements for nuclear plant financing, liability regimes and laws, regulatory requirements, supply chain development, and other elements for a robust civil nuclear program. The Gen 4 International Forum, or GIF, is another great resource. It provides a framework for international cooperation in research and development for the next generation of nuclear reactors. Here at the U.S. Department of Energy, we are focusing our efforts around 4 major priorities. The first is to sustain our existing fleet. The second is to get advanced reactor technologies across the finish line. That's a top priority of mine. The third is to establish and maintain our critical fuel cycle infrastructure. And the fourth is to enhance the global competitiveness of the United States. I believe that our industry is innovating now more than ever, and especially in the advanced reactor technology arena. I'm excited by the diverse catalog of technology options that are underway in the United States, from microreactors for small grids or remote or islanded communities, to SMRs, to larger reactors that will meet baseload generation needs. We have the right reactor for the application. My office has taken action on making these technologies a reality by launching the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, or ARDP. This program focuses on the actual construction of advanced demonstration reactors that are affordable to build and operate in the next 5 to 7 years. We're also strongly supporting the National Reactor Innovation Center, or NRIC, to enable these demonstrations and the development of the Versatile Test Reactor, VTR, to ensure that we have the infrastructure that's necessary to support the long-term success of U.S. advanced nuclear technologies. We're moving forward, building on the United States' legacy of innovation in advanced technologies. I'm confident that working together, we can address the challenges facing nuclear energy to meet a wide range of needs in a low-carbon future. The time to act is now. Thank you for your interest and dedication to this very important issue, and I look forward to the following discussions.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Baranwal, for those inspiring and invigorating remarks. Now, I'd like to move us on to our panel discussion entitled U.S. Reactor Technologies, Tackling Real-World Challenges. It will be moderated by Dr. Benjamin Reinke, the Executive Director of Office of Strategic Planning and Policy of the Office of the Secretary at the U.S. Department of Energy. We are honored and pleased to have with us today a first ever coming together of certain CEOs who've never been on the same platform together. We have Mr. Patrick Fragman, President and CEO of Westinghouse, Mr. John Hopkins, Chairman and CEO of NuScale, Mr. Clay Sell, CEO of X Energy, Dr. Chris Singh, President and CEO of Holtec International, and Mr. Jay Wildman, President and CEO of GE Hitachi Nuclear. Dr. Reinke, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. Well, thank you all for being here today. I'd like to say just a few remarks to kind of open up our conversation. And what I'll be doing is going around the virtual room and asking each of our CEOs to answer a series of questions. We'll hit 3 high-level important issues and ask that each talk from the perspective of their companies. And then we'll move on to the second session. So by way of starting, I would like to begin by talking about how this administration is viewing nuclear. And if you haven't been paying attention, for the last 3.5 years, this administration has taken nuclear very seriously. We have worked across many different initiatives to reestablish the United States as the dominant player in the global nuclear regime. And through that, we have worked specifically to focus on public-private partnerships, with the emphasis here being on the way that our private industry is able to innovate faster and the government is able to support that innovation through public programs in a partnership fashion. Today, as Dr. Baranwal and I will discuss the federal government leadership programs, we will focus a little bit on what we are doing to enable the private sector. But personally, I'm much more excited to hear from the private sector leadership that's gathered here today, talk to you about what they're doing to make sure that their companies are ready to compete across the whole globe. Why now? Why now U.S. nuclear? That's sort of the question we're grappling with today as we talk. And I do believe that the global community has an opportunity to take a look at U.S. nuclear with fresh set of eyes. And I think you're going to hear a little bit today about why that's so important. This administration, like I said, has had several major initiatives focusing on nuclear. But the most recent that sort of captures all of those efforts is something that we called a strategy to restore American nuclear leadership. This was born out of an effort that President Trump launched called the Nuclear Fuel Working Group, which was supposed to take a full supply chain look at U.S. nuclear to determine how and when we will get back in the game in global nuclear, with the U.S. presence in a leadership role once again. Through the Nuclear Fuel Working Group, there were many policy initiatives that were identified, some ongoing and others that were new, that were going to hopefully, as an aggregate, pull together a comprehensive strategy for the U.S. government to point the direction for where we are going in nuclear and to allow for us to partner with private sector to move forward aggressively. I'd just like to identify a few of the major initiatives that have been linked already and have moved forward as major steps. One, I think, is one of the leading and most important initiatives Dr. Baranwal has already covered, and that's the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. Would hopefully get multiple reactors demonstrated in the United States in the next 5 to 7 years so that they are ready to be taken to market, fully commercialized, and ready to be sold here in the United States and abroad. Additionally, I'd like to highlight that we have, for the last couple of years, had a high-assay, low-enriched uranium demonstration program that is intended to support the fuels that will be necessary to support the future light water reactor fleet with advanced fuels, as well as many of the advanced fuels that will be represented today and the fuel needs of the industry moving forward with SMRs of various types. In addition to that, we also are working on the development of the versatile test reactor, and Dr. Baranwal mentioned this as well. But just this week, there was a major announcement by the Office of Nuclear Energy on a path forward and a major critical design step we call here in government parlance CD1, or Critical Decision 1, which is allowing us to move forward with the design and ultimately the construction of eventually the versatile test reactor. Should we continue down this pathway, the versatile test reactor will be a world-leading flexible reactor able to provide fast neutron source capabilities and a series of fuel types that would be radiated and coolants and moderators handled. So we're excited about all of those programs, but there's one last one that I'd like to mention, because really the Nuclear Fuel Working Group was an interagency effort. And there were many recommendations that were provided for the Department of Energy, but also for our sister agencies and departments. One of the major new initiatives that was announced within the last couple of months was a policy change for what we call the International Development Finance Corporation. And this was the newly evolved version of an equity financing corporation that is part of the U.S. government, which evolved from what was formerly called the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, or OPIC. So if you haven't heard of this, the new IDFC is going to be a major player in helping U.S. exports move forward across a whole host of industries, but energy being a very important key strategic one. And with that, the policy change is now allowing for the DFC for the first time to potentially finance nuclear projects abroad and potentially to partner with the Exim Bank of the United States, Export-Import Bank, which is a major player as well. So these policies taken together, those just being four of tens of policies across the whole federal government that we're trying to tackle, are the first steps in what we consider to be the U.S. Government position in trying to reestablish global nuclear leadership. However, the thing that makes the United States really unique is the fact that we have tens of innovators, companies that are out there across the entirety of North America and many in the United States who are aggressively moving forward with their own conceptual designs, going through most recently one small modular reactor company represented here today, going through successfully the Nuclear Regulatory Commission CD process and DCA process, apologies. And with that, we're seeing U.S. nuclear moving forward with the leadership coming from not just the government, but for the first time in a long time, major new steps by the private industry in a very competitive fashion. So with that, we want to be able to enable our private sector colleagues to move forward, to get their reactors to market, and to do so rapidly. And I think what you're going to hear about today is the fact that these reactors are ready. They're ready to be considered today. They're ready to be considered by the international community for potential deployment all around the world. And each of these companies has a whole host of technologies that they can bring to bear. With that, I'd just like to say, I'm really excited for the discussion we're going to have here with this distinguished panel of leaders from industry. By my count, and I could have this wrong, I believe just with the five individuals represented here on the call with me, we have 2 large light water reactors. We have 5 small modular reactors and at least 1 microreactor, spanning all types of fuels, coolants, exotic technologies, traditional technologies, sizes, and ultimately applications. And I think that's what you're going to hear from our folks here today. So with that, I'd like to jump into the questions, and we'll zip around the room and hopefully allow each of you to provide some initial remarks. What I'd like to do is ask you if you have any opening thoughts, please provide those, as well as I'll go ahead and tee off the first question, which I'd like you to handle with those initial remarks. Each of your companies is pursuing a novel nuclear technology or multiple, and those promise to offer new value streams compared to traditional large light water reactors. How are you viewing the global market or the global markets for your technologies? And what is different about today's market as compared to 10 years ago? So with that, I'd like to start with Patrick.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Baranwal, for inviting me to speak. I'll start maybe first with a few introductory statements. It's becoming obvious that nuclear is a critical part of the solution for today's energy challenges. It's a key element of the fight against climate change. It's also a valuable complement to intermittent renewable sources. Nuclear and renewables can be combined to shape a decarbonized power generation backbone. A few years ago, the conventional wisdom was that nuclear plants could only operate baseload. We all know it's not the case. Some of our customers worldwide operate their existing plants with a very high level of flexibility. Looking at new plants, our new AP1000 reactor can also be easily integrated in a renewable landscape. Very large load window, high gradients to ramp up or down production, and it's not only a matter of CO2 emissions. The overall environmental footprint and safety record of nuclear energy is surpassing any other fuel, and definitely by far all the fossil fuels. Secondly, the economics. The IEA was reminding us recently that the levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE, of existing nuclear plants are among the lowest of all fuels. What is true for existing plants can also become the reality for new plants if we put in place proven success factors to keep the cost down. And I'll focus on 3 areas: construction time, building a learning curve, and financing. Construction time massively drives costs and risks, which is why the AP1000 has a stable, modular, and compact design, in addition to its advanced passive safety features. The AP1000 footprint is also radically different. It's about a third of the footprint of any other Gen 3 plant, and is even much smaller than many SMRs which are being developed today. Building a fleet also drives economies of scale. We built 4 AP1000 units in China. Between the first and the third unit, we could already observe a double-digit cost reduction of the total plant costs. Financing, as said rightly just before, is also a key factor impacting the economics of nuclear plants. And we are very excited of the recent inclusion of nuclear among the projects the US DFC can help. We do believe indeed, as stated earlier, that DFC coupled with US Exim Bank support can benefit any customer worldwide in getting competitive financing. The third element is resilience, and this has become an obvious thing in the COVID times we've seen. Nuclear plants operate at very high level of availability. On existing plants, we observe record time for refueling intervals and services. Utility teams and contractor teams worldwide have made a great demonstration of resilience of the nuclear industry in the past 9 months. As far as new plants are concerned, our Chinese customer of AP1000 recently shared during the WNA how these units perform on the Chinese grid. The first outage at Sanmen 1 lasted 46 days. Afterwards, the first outage at Haiyang 2 was only 30 days. These values are extremely low, especially for a brand new reactor. Fourth, one size does not fit all. Some grids are centralized and can accommodate large units. Some grids are very decentralized and can only accommodate smaller units. We are designing a full range of new plants, starting with innovative microreactors with eVinci. We're also engaged on SMR programs, such as the one in cooperation with EDF. And we finally propose new plants with the AP1000, which has already 4 units in operation and will have 2 more on the US grid in the next few years. Last and not least, the existing plants need to operate during their lifetime at the highest level of safety and sustained performance. And we cannot talk about nuclear energy without talking about nuclear safety. It's an existential topic for our industry. Our technologies and services contribute to safety and are also cost effective. We have the capability to support operators of any type of reactor, PWR, BWR, BVR, CONDU, which allows us to share lessons, technology, and expertise across the fleets and across the geographies. We probably have the largest portfolio of services and solutions in the industry, which we believe is a key asset to provide the highest level of service. It also allows us to work hand in hand with clients to develop O&M strategies to the end of life of the plant as long-term operations. So all in all, we believe all these elements for both new plants and existing plants are essential to today and tomorrow's energy production systems. Now, going back to your question on the topic of the what has changed radically in the past years, I think we need to start by the fuel landscape. And here, the penetration of renewable is a major fact, which, to be fair, very few were forecasting many years ago. Also in the US, the gas glut has created a landscape which makes the overall economics equation very difficult for the existing plants. So it's great that we want to work for new reactors. We also need to have a thought on how do we maintain those assets with the existing plants. The second aspect is grids are becoming very digital. It's not only the grids, it's also the technologies, which brings lots of benefits in terms of improvement of customer service, in terms of performance, but also a certain number of threats, including cybersecurity threats, which is something that is radically changing the landscape also of assets such as nuclear plants. The third aspect is energy security. Energy security is back, and it was highlighted today back in many countries, and that's also shaping country energy policies. And lastly, what we see is it's not one size fits all. There are many different needs, which is why we have the full-scale portfolio. So if I was to summarize a little bit the situation, even though we're close to 10 years after Fukushima, there is now an obvious rejuvenation of the sentiment in favor of nuclear energy. And we definitely have to work on that momentum.
Thanks, Patrick. Jay, you're up next.
Great. In these virtual rooms, we don't have to go alphabetical. That's fantastic. Appreciate it, Ben. And I want to thank Rita and the Department of Energy for allowing me to speak and really just take a minute to recognize all the great work that you guys have done in supporting the industry with the Nuclear Fuels Working Group. I think it really lays out a comprehensive plan and a roadmap for the government to engage the private industry. And again, congratulations on all the very specific wins you guys have had to date, including, as you mentioned, the IFDC and its ability to now support nuclear projects. Of course, XM plays a big role in that and making us competitive as Team America. And of course, the launch of the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program is really, really key to get moving, to demonstrate something, to make it real within that 5 to 7 year window. And of course, the Versatile Test Reactor Program, and congratulations on yesterday's decision on reaching CD1. Fantastic program that we're proud to be a part of and really, really needed as we start to think about the advanced reactor development. So as I think about, I'm looking at now about 439 attendees out there. I imagine sitting on a dais in Vienna rather than our headquarters here in Wilmington, North Carolina. But I would imagine that everybody would agree and appreciate the value of nuclear power. We all know it's carbon-free. We all know it's safe, 24/7, and reliable. Those are really, really great attributes that have earned us the ability to generate, for example, 20% of the power in the U.S. And over 55%, as Rita said, of the carbon-free. But really, those benefits are not enough. Those benefits won't continue to be realized if we can't drive down the cost of nuclear energy. We need to be able to make it cost competitive with all other sources of generation so that we earn our seat at the table with this great technology. You know, WNA's Harmony program talked about the need for both large and small reactors across the world to reach that goal of harmony in the future. I would say that the nuclear sector has always been at the forefront of R&D and technology progress, but again, focusing on cost and simplicity is a new set of muscle memory we're going to need to get. So what do we need to do to make small modular and other reactor types more cost competitive? I think it's a real paradigm shift for us that we need to focus on. So I start to think about what if? What if the next generation of an SMR was cost competitive with other forms at around $2,500 per kilowatt? What if the total cost, overnight cost, isn't double-digit billions, but it's at or under $1 billion US dollars? What if we could build a reactor that truly is simple, bringing in different design attributes that lets you mitigate a large Great Loca? Imagine all the safety equipment that would no longer be required. What if we could utilize an existing supply chain and off-the-shelf components, and all of that becomes easy to do rather than stick-built specifically for nuclear? And what if this same technology meant to bring more decarbonization to our grid could also decarbonize process heat, hydrogen generation, district heating, and in addition to that, as Patrick mentioned, be completely complementary to renewables and wind and solar. And again, to make it real, what if this can be on the grid by 2027 or 2028? So that's what we're working on with the BWRX 300, GE Hitachi's cost competitive small modular reactor. Those are the what ifs that we are targeting today. The engineers are now taking really a design to cost mentality and bringing in different solutions like advanced concrete, construction techniques, using catalog items versus specially designed parts, and a proven supply chain, including Global Nuclear Fuels licensed fuel design GNF2. So with that, thinking about your question on 10 years ago, I go back to what the world was back then. We just come through and we're digging out of a financial crisis. We were just coming through maybe a burst bubble of a nuclear renaissance, if you will. And the world was a very different place. Roll forward to what the discussions are out there today, and a lot of what Patrick says, absolutely agree with. I would add to that, decarbonization has become a large part of the discussion now that wasn't back then. You see a number of utilities, a number of states, a number of countries committing to carbon neutral by 2050 or something very close to that. And again, the world coming in and looking at different solutions for nuclear to decarbonize the things like hydrogen production, desalination, district heat, and industrial process needs. So I think the world has shifted. We need to be able to bring all the nuclear attributes to the table and make sure that we can continue this great technology. Thanks.
Thank you so much. All right. We've covered a lot of ground here. So I'd like to turn it over to John. You're up. Please give us NuScale's perspective. Thanks.
Pleasure to be here today at the 64th annual regular session of the IAEA General Conference. Dr. Baranwal commented, we're faced with pollution, energy security, water scarcity, and climate change. All global challenges that we can and we must address. All global challenges, these are the issues of great urgency, and to solve them, we are called to act as members of a global community in a spirit of innovation and collaboration. Our collective efforts require a mindset of flexibility to allow room for true collaboration. Our approach is to the greatest energy challenges of our time and must be adaptable to a wide range of circumstances as to ensure that all of humankind is afforded the opportunity to thrive. Innovation, collaboration, and flexibility are at the heart of NuScale's advanced nuclear technology. We currently work with private industry, academia, and governments, leading an enhanced level of imagination and creativity through diverse perspectives. We follow a philosophy of continuous improvement through collaboration, allowing us to deliver an SMR nuclear power plant for the modern grid that will supply diverse electrical and thermal applications around the world. With the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission approval of the NuScale SMR just last month, we accomplished a significant milestone, not only for NuScale, but also for the entire U.S. nuclear sector and to the other advanced nuclear technologies that will follow. It lets the world know that the commercialization of U.S. SMR technology is in fact a reality. We are incredibly proud of this effort. To usher in the future era of energy security, Small modular reactors and other advanced nuclear technology should offer an unparalleled level of safety, be sufficiently flexible for load-following variable power generation to maximize grid stability, and offer a new level of power plant resilience. It should also be economically competitive with other sources of power generation and help governments worldwide to achieve their carbon-free energy mandates. The strong safety case, operational flexibility, reliability, and affordability of the NuScale SMR technology is premised on these important needs. We've all heard the fact that there's 6 billion people living in energy poverty, and more than 800 million currently lack access just to clean water. The energy industry has an innate responsibility to harness innovative technologies and ideas to help remedy these immense challenges for our planet. NuScale's SMR technology can provide reliable, flexible power to diverse applications because our SMRs have the ability to tailor electric and steam-powered outputs for different functions. Some modules can be dedicated to electricity production, while others provide heat to support industrial processes such as hydrogen production, desalination, or powering wastewater treatment plants and water purification facilities. In a changing climate, it's more important than ever to be able to provide efficient, flexible solutions to solve our most pressing energy and water resource challenges. Again, I thank you for being here, and I'd like to also thank my esteemed colleagues on this panel and for others participating in this very important event. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. All right, now I'd like to turn it over to former Deputy Secretary of Energy, Clay Sell, who's now with X Energy. So Clay, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Ranking. I'm on a sound check. Can everybody hear me okay? It's a tremendous honor and pleasure for me to be on this panel with Ben and Dr. Baranwal and all of my colleagues, my competitors, my co-conspirators, my collaborators. We're in this together, and it's really quite an exciting time. I really want to go back to the prompt that Ben gave us, which is what is different from 10 years ago. Patrick, Jay, and John each gave perspectives on that, which I completely agree with. I just want to add a few more points. Compared to 10 years ago, on the decarbonization front, that debate is over. And that's different from 10 years ago. Now, there's still a debate going on as to the tactics to achieve decarbonization, for the timeline to achieve decarbonization, but the debate on decarbonization is over. Markets are being shaped by the governments. Utility executives are making decisions to commit to decarbonization. Capitalists and capital providers are funding sustainable decarbonizing technologies. And that is a dramatic change from 10 years ago. A second major change from 10 years ago is the Generation 2 fleet. And that Generation 2 fleet that was largely built by Patrick's company and Jay's company and other companies around the world, that fleet, which provides today 10% of the globe's electricity, is approaching the end of its life. Most of those plants, particularly in the West, were built between 1970 and 1985 for a 40 or 60-year life. The great roll-off of these plants starts in 25 to 30. I mean, that's at its steepest point. And that is the opportunity that the advanced reactor market, companies like ours, have been pointed to, have been investing towards, and have been looking to realize, for a decade now. That retirement of the Generation 2 fleet is only exacerbated, that need is only exacerbated by the early retirement of coal or the economic retirement of coal that is happening all around the world. But the final thing, in addition to what Patrick and Jay have argued, that is different about this time than 10 years ago, is Generation 4 technologies are ready and available for the marketplace. So these three things together, decarbonization, the roll-off of the Generation 2 fleet, and the readiness of Generation 4 technologies, have never coincided before. And that's what makes this time such an exciting time for the advanced reactor industry. It's why our company has invested so many private dollars to realize this vision, and it's why we welcomed and so appreciate the massive massive investment that the U.S. government has made through a variety of programs to ensure that the technology, the reactor technology, the fuel technology, the enrichment capability, and the fuel cycle is ready to realize this next generation of nuclear power. So, you know, as if I put myself in the shoes of potential customers or consumers, and I'm honored to be in this virtual discussion with people, you know, in virtually every time zone around the world. You know, I think the biggest challenges that you want to see a technology deliver for you is, number one, project delivery certainty. You want to see a project delivered in less than 5 years. You want to see it delivered at an affordable cost and price. You want to see a competitive and substantial financing package from the home country, you know, that can accompany that technology. And that's one of the most exciting things that this administration has done, as Ben Ranke alluded to, in terms of the willingness of the International Development Finance Corporation, teamed with the U.S. Exim Bank, teamed with you know, international banking institutions in partnership, can now offer a very competitive financing package to customers around the world. And for us, that really presents an opportunity for each of you to realize, you know, to take advantage of Generation 4 technology. X Energy, to close, produces high-temperature gas-cooled reactors. We also make the fuel, the TRISO ceramic encapsulated fuel, which is the secret sauce of our reactor. We also produce that. And we also have a microreactor under design today for the Department of Defense. We offer intrinsic safety. We offer improved and more efficient waste forms. We offer high temperatures, which are incredibly attractive for process heat. And by the way, the process heat market will be decarbonized as well. And our technology offers load following capability, which really allows us to marry up and match well with intermittent sources like renewables that have been deployed and will continue to be deployed increasingly all around the world. Most importantly, our reactor comes in an 80 megawatt module, which is optimized in a 4-pack, so 320 megawatts. We've done a lot of market studies. We've engaged with many of you around the world. We think that's the right size, not just for emerging markets, but quite frankly, it's the right size for developed and industrial markets all around the globe. And so it's quite an exciting time. We are so appreciative of the tremendous leadership that the U.S. government, that this U.S. government has made to put U.S. industry back in the game with a variety of technologies. We look forward to engaging, and I look forward to the rest of the panel. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Clay. All right, now I'd like to turn it over to Chris. Please give us a Holtec's perspective. Thank you.
I think, for all your inspiring presentations. Can you hear me? Okay, great. My webcam is not working, unfortunately, so you will not see my beautiful tie. But I'll limit to try to make up for that by not taking up too much time. Okay, we are an energy technology company, founded in 1986, and today we provide engineered nuclear components and systems to 16 countries around the world. In the United States, we have 2/3 of the back end of the fuel business in commercial nuclear plants. We are a turnkey supplier. I personally have always believed that you can't design if you don't build. You have to manufacture to know really how to design right. So from the very beginning, our company began to purchase and renovate existing manufacturing plants. And most recently, we built a large state-of-the-art manufacturing plant in Camden, New Jersey, only about 100 miles from Washington, D.C. I will invite any one of you to come see the plant. It's a 21st century plant, the most modern in the world for heavy manufacturing. It has been built expressly to build SMRs. Our SMR 160, which we started back in 2010, only a few months before Fukushima. And for a while, we were wondering whether we were on the right course after Fukushima and the general decline in morale and increase in opposition to nuclear. But we believed that we had the right recipe, we had the right technology, and we should continue to persevere because it will one day it will be appreciated. Our target is unconditional safety. We have achieved it. Our design is unconditionally safe. You postulate an accident event, and we show you how the reactor will take care of itself. That basically is the nutshell. When safety, we cannot sell a reactor to the public unless we can demonstrate by words and deed that the reactor will not cause radioactivity release. And that's been our singular focus for the past 10 years. We also, in the time, basically have persevered alone. We have spent 98% of all the funds expended on our SMR program has been funded by Holtec itself. Probably a record in the industry. But it shows our belief that we have a technology that will suit many countries, many sectors of the economy. We like to think it's a universal small modular reactor. It is very much in keeping with our goal to manufacture in those countries that insist on localization, but the manufacturing is done in the U.S., so we can transfer the technology for manufacturing to those countries. So we eliminate any supply chain problems going to other countries. Right now, at the present time, I am told that we are the largest exporter of capital nuclear equipment in the United States. And we intend to further improve our export situation in the coming years when the SMRs come online. Now, for us, the most beneficial difference between 2010, when we started, and today is that we now own several nuclear plant sites. We have purchased several nuclear plants because we are in decommissioning, and the plants are shut down. We own them, and we decommission them. And our goal is, because all the infrastructure is already there, it's environmentally qualified, is to build our first SMR at one of those sites. That's our goal. There is no issues. The public is used to it. They have had a plant, and especially if we show that how dramatically improved the safety profile of this reactor is. So that's our goal. Now we are also looking at energy stabilization, grid stabilization, because we think our reactor will serve as part of a local mini grid ecosystem where energy is provided to a small area in the world coming in front of us where everything would be electric. So keeping that in mind, we've launched an aqueous battery storage system program, which is now ongoing. We are producing these batteries. They will serve as the energy storage adjacent to our SMRs if a particular customer needs it. We can also put solar collectors and use the same batteries to deliver power. In other words, we are looking for a basically carbon-free energy ecosystem. And these will be mini grids. They don't require large transmission lines. They will provide power locally to the communities. Our SMR 160, we have envisioned it to meet that future market. It can be deployed. It's 160 megawatts. That's why we call it SMR 160. We can deploy it anywhere in the world. You don't need water. You know, power plants are voracious consumers of water. You don't need water. You can cool, you can reject the waste heat using our air-cooled condensers, which also we specialize in. We deliver air-cooled condensers to customers around the world. So we are merging the two technologies. So our SMR 160 can be used anywhere in the world, in the desert of Saudi Arabia or in the Arctic. It is also completely flexible. We can have one SMR 160, 2, 4, as many as you will. And of course, you can build it as you need. So especially for a small country that can't afford to buy a number of them, they build one, they produce power, earn revenue, build the next one. And each one is autonomous, so there's no need to build a whole bunch of them in the very beginning. It has, of course, to support distributed generation is the key objective here for all SMRs. But we also have kept in mind that we can use it for defense purposes, such as tritium production. The reactor is configured to provide that capability. What is different between 2010 and today is, of course, our colleagues stated the greater awareness of carbon, dangers of carbon. Of course, that will be a driver. We believe that the public can be persuaded. And I tell you one telltale sign. One of our major partners is Mitsubishi of Japan. Mitsubishi believes that after we get our unconditionally reactor designed and demonstrated at one place, that Japan will come back as a nuclear customer. But we have to show that indeed it is unconditionally safe. We think our reactor is suitable for developing countries where the market is, because, you know, in those countries, there is always political struggle internally in those countries for locating reactors. Not that they don't want them, they want them. They want to have access to power. So a small reactor distributed around the country is also politically better for them. I've talked to many of these governments, and I know that suits their focus. And finally, I tell you, our main objective is to make the reactor, as Jay said, cost competitive with a modest carbon credit. Our reactor will compete with any source of energy generation. That's our target. We have virtually achieved it. We look at the emerging technologies like 5G, communications, robotics, etc., as the means to further drive down our operating cost of the reactor. So the application that we're going to be making to the NRC will have many of these innovative components. Thank you.
Chris. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground, and you all have provided a lot of, I think, sort of the perspective of what's going on today in the market. In order to keep us on schedule and on track, I'm going to ask that we wrap up. We've got a couple more questions to cover, so you each have 1 minute to cover each of these questions. So we're going to keep it just to the focus points, and if you can, build off of one another. So with that, first of the two questions I wanted to hit, you previously described there are a lot of nations with longstanding nuclear programs and those without nuclear programs today. We're looking at advanced reactors, large light water reactors, SMRs, microreactors for the first time. Others are looking at it to replace the current fleet or to add to their current fleet. Why should a nation look at U.S. nuclear? Why should they look at it now? And what do we need to do, or what do you need to do to prepare the way with that country? So with that, I'd like to say, let's turn it over to Clay. Why don't you give this a start? Thanks.
Can you hear me? On the why U.S. question, you know, I think it's really In the dialogue that we've had with a number of countries and potential buyers around the globe, I mean, you're really talking about a 60 to 80 year partnership, and in many respects, much longer than that. And it is imbued and covered in a deep strategic relationship. And so part of what the consideration is who do I want my long-term strategic partner to be? Not just on the technology, not just on the fuel cycle, but from a national security, from an economic relationship, from a non-proliferation partner relationship. And I think it's really, I think the United States has historically proven to be a great partner with every country that's deployed U.S. technology, and I think that will continue. But the second point I want to make is it gives countries an opportunity to benefit from the massive private sector investment that's been made with our government in innovation. And if there's one thing that the U.S. economy still leads the world in, without question, it's in innovation. And the technology innovation that we've brought to the nuclear space is truly amazing, and it's ready for the marketplace. And we look forward to partnering with nation states and their utilities to see it deployed.
Great, thanks. Chris, let's turn it back over to you.
Record of the U.S. in successfully establishing local nuclear infrastructure in a foreign country. America started with Atom for Peace program in 1956, which today has made France, Britain, and Germany. They benefited from it and developed the technology. So I think U.S. has a proven record. Second, U.S. has the most developed regulatory regime. U.S. NRC, by far, I can tell you, I interact with about 16 of them. U.S. NRC is by far the best in terms of rules of engagement, the regulatory literature. There's a massive amount of regulatory literature that U.S. NRC has produced, which will benefit any country. Our national labs are the very best. They also contribute the amount of technical information that comes from no other country. So U.S. does have all the elements to help a country develop its own nuclear infrastructure and use our plants. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. All right, Jay, give us your perspective.
Great. So I think, building on this aspect of really, and I've heard you and Rita say it out before, but that strong relationship government to government and private company to governments for the 60, 80, 100 years is really, really key. I think the other piece is really innovation. If you think about what's happened since those very first reactors in the 50s and how we've evolved throughout both just the deployment, but also the regulatory regime, as Chris talks about. But, the upcoming Gen 4, really, really critical. Clay talked about that. GE Hitachi is working with TerraPower for the natrium solution there in the Gen 4 space. And I think that really brings a lot to other governments that are looking at developing nuclear for the first time and really standing up an industry in their company. So a lot of attributes that are good domestically, really important internationally in this relationship.
Excellent. All right, John, tell us what you're thinking about it at NuScale.
Well, the U.S. is committed to leading the advanced nuclear technology revolution. And as we see today, the pieces are falling in place. So why now? With climate disruption, there's a sense of urgency with the need, as I mentioned earlier, for clean water around the world. And also, as it was tied together too about the U.S., our capacity now with the former Overseas Private Investment Corp, now DFC, and the ability with XM, the combined punch allows us to go out and compete internationally on the financing as well. So we have tremendous support in this country with our government. So thank you.
Thanks, John. Patrick Westinghouse, what's your perspective on this?
Which has been said by my colleagues. I'll just elaborate on a few other topics. The first one is energy security. There is another dimension to it, which is none of the companies that are here on this panel are government-owned. We're not an instrument of our nation's foreign policy. Our services are only based on a mutually beneficial business relationship. And that's important, especially when you have in mind areas like digitalization, areas which indeed are areas where energy security can have a real meaning for the owners. The second aspect on which I'd like to build on is the long-term marriage, the century-old marriage between an OEM and the operator. The other dimension to it is that the nuclear industry has a tremendous amount of experience on operating and maintaining plants. And this, we can bring that to the new operators and to the owners on the way they have to face and anticipate and plan for aging of components, for advanced fuels, for expertise on outage optimization. And this is a key asset to sustain the safety and the performance of the fleet. And I would say last but not least, which is maybe the first and obvious point, is the U.S. nuclear industry has an unrivaled track record in terms of safety and operational performance. And one of the examples is, for instance, the advanced passive safety features of the AP1000, which is probably the safest and most reliable nuclear plant design in operations in the world today. So why U.S. industry? It's definitely an obvious choice.
Thanks. You all covered a lot of great ground there. So the last question I have for you, we're going to try to wrap all this up. I think you've laid a case for why now, why look at U.S. nuclear. But there are always questions about how you go about doing it. I know you've mentioned different aspects of U.S. government tools you're looking to employ in the export of your technologies globally and or for building in the United States. But at the beginning of the session, I spoke, about some of those tools, about some of the programs we have in place, et cetera. You're looking at this market as global. That's the way the U.S. government is looking at it as well. What do you see as challenges in front of you to get to market, to get your technology sold at a high level around the world? And how will you work with the U.S. government, other governments, or even international institutions? So we're going to hear in a moment from the NEA and from the IAEA. How do you view the role of those types of institutions in where you're going? So again, we got about a minute per person, so we're going to move quickly. John, let's start with you.
I think what you just commented on, Ben, was, government-to-government sales is very crucial for our industry right now. And, the other is, many people have mentioned commercial viability. I'm a strong believer our technology will provide the attributes we mentioned. It's to be able to compete around the world. In the U.S., it's competing against natural gas when you're at $2 to $3 billion. Not so much necessarily outside the U.S. Outside the U.S., it's our capacity to compete against state-owned enterprises. They're government-funded and government-owned for the most part. And to have those tools that you mentioned, having government stand behind us to help promote is critically important.
Thanks, John. All right, G. Hitachi, how are you viewing this? You've got a lot of experience, decades of it, working with different governments. How do you fit in this in the new world?
I think the way this industry has evolved, especially as you look across at other state-owned entities that are out there internationally competing, it really needs to be that Team USA mentality of really going shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. government and getting advocacy out there and really bringing the best of the best out there in the technologies that we represent in our national labs, the universities as well. And then the ability to bring more than a project, to develop a local supply chain, to develop the education of their country in nuclear industry is key as well. So again, it takes the team, and I think we have a lot to offer out there worldwide in a lot of different applications for nuclear.
Thank you. Chris, you're up. How's Holtec viewing it?
I think our biggest concern should be unauthorized appropriation of our intellectual property, which is personally my biggest concern. We have developed great technologies, but once they get revealed through the NRC licensing process and all, They may be copied by other countries without our authorization. That's a big concern. It has hurt us in the past, and I think in the SMR, unless our government does something in that area, we are very exposed. And the other area is we need to levelize the playing field. We cannot be competing with government-owned companies without some rules of engagement where they don't get unlimited subsidy. And we of course, don't ever. So that there needs to be some deep thinking on how to deal with this uneven playing field.
Thanks, Chris.
I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. That's great. And Patrick, Westinghouse's perspective, how are you working with other governments? What's your challenge?
Yeah, I'd like to come back on this topic of level playing field because there is another phase to it, which is how the energy markets are organized. And this is something where in Europe and in the US, they could be more done by governments. If I take the example of renewables, which are carbon-free sources like nuclear, they benefit from very strong policy support. They benefit from very large subsidies, and they have priority of dispatch. It's very surprising that nuclear energy doesn't have such type of advantage. So there is an urgent need to foster a redesign of the energy policy structures. The other things that come to my mind are the fact that licensing programs need to continue to adapt to novel plant design, to technology. So all the work which can be done in harmonization, standardization of regulatory requirements among regulators worldwide goes definitely in the right direction. Additionally, first-of-a-kind developments may require some government support to mitigate some unusual risks and create appropriate conditions for success. And the last aspect is expertise, and which is the base and the core of at the end of the day, what is in our companies are the expertise which are in the brains of our engineers. And these are typically type of actions which can be transverse to an industry and great areas of cooperation between all the stakeholders, private stakeholders, public stakeholders, government, academia. We participate in such programs in full cooperation with other stakeholders.
Thank you. All right, Clay, could you please close us out? What are you looking at globally?
I'll try to finish out the speed round. Thank you, Ben. So in terms of challenges, I think in terms of challenges and the role that the U.S. government can play and the role that the IAEA can play. And from my perspective, the biggest challenges for all of us on the panel, with the possible exception of Patrick, is none of us have built our new innovative designs yet. So getting that first-of-a-kind reactor built, demonstrated, and shown, everyone wants to buy the second one, and I don't blame them. Fewer people want to buy the first one. And so the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program that the U.S. is funding is critical to the success and deployment of these innovative new technologies. Second aspect is the fuel cycle. Historically, the realm of government, we need high-assay LEU in the United States. Our government has made a massive investment to bring forward that capability. But when I look at the future, the growth in energy globally over the next 40 years is in emerging markets. And many of those emerging markets don't have an existing nuclear regulatory infrastructure, don't have an existing supply chain. And so we are really going to look to partner with our colleagues at the International Atomic Energy Agency to support in a sound policy way, in a way that supports our non-proliferation objectives, but to develop the regulatory infrastructure and the supply chain infrastructure that equips our partner nations in deploying advanced nuclear to meet their nation's energy needs over the course of the next 20 and 40 years. And that is going to be a big obligation that all of us at the IAEA need to take on, and it's something that we look forward to, and it's an opportunity that we embrace. Thank you.
All right. Thanks all. That was great. Made it in record time on the last couple of questions. Thanks for being with us today. I really appreciate it on behalf of DOE, on behalf of the whole U.S. federal government. Thanks for being a part of this. We're really excited to see about everything you're doing right now, where it's going to go. And I think you made your case very well today that the U.S. nuclear is in a great position to compete globally now. With that, I would like to turn the conversation back over to Alicia Duncan from the Office of Nuclear Energy.
Thank you so much, Ben, for an amazing discussion. Thank you so much to our CEO panelists. for your time, for your insight. It was just wonderful to get a look into your minds, and we appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. Now I'd like to go ahead and turn our discussion to a more global stage. I would like to have Mr. Bill Magwood from the Nuclear Energy Agency, the Director General, please join us for his remarks.
Well, good morning to you in the U.S. I think it's still morning in the U.S., isn't it? I believe it is. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me start by saying that I thought the panel, the CEO panel, was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And I know many of those gentlemen, and I know they're doing fantastic work. But I'm going to play a little bit of favorite here and congratulate John Hopkins, the CEO of NuScale. As John knows, NuScale and I have some history that goes back 20 years, I think. And so John and his colleagues are to be congratulated for the design certification. That's a huge accomplishment for not just for John's company, but really for everyone. And special congratulations to Jose Reyes, the godfather of NuScale, and I'm sure that he's extraordinarily proud. So I want to start with that. This is a very important discussion that we're having here today because I think the CEOs captured it very well. There is an urgency, and the urgency comes from the fact that the world seems to have concluded that it wants to decarbonize. And this is an effort we see in our member countries very fervently. Countries that we work very closely with have set for themselves a target to go to essentially zero carbon by about 2050. And the Paris Agreement, which many of them signed, sets out a goal for a carbon intensity of 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour of generation. This is an extraordinarily difficult goal to meet. For perspective, for OECD countries, for the developed countries, that means that they will have to remove 85% of the carbon that they currently generate from their electricity systems by 2050. So anyone who knows anything about the electricity business knows that this is an extraordinarily difficult task, hard to almost imagine how we would do it. And quite frankly, I'm not sure there's an example of anything we've ever done in human society that compares to the kind of task that would be. Many countries have taken the approach to focus mostly on variable renewable energy to accomplish this. Wind and solar have been deployed in tremendous numbers around the world, and we think this is a good thing. We think that wind and solar energy provide tremendous benefits and the investment is appropriate. But at the same time, we also recognize that before the pandemic, we were seeing peak generation of CO2 from energy in the world. And so that means that despite these huge investments in renewables, we have not been achieving our goals. So it's very clear to us that we have to look at this differently. And I think as I talk to ministers in different governments around the world, it's very clear to me they think so as well. They think that there has to be a way to approach this seriously. Many of them don't know how to do that, but they know that what's happening today is not working. Our analysis, at the NEA, we've been doing a great deal of work on this over the last few years. Our analysis is that just as we've heard from many governments, including the United States government, that all low carbon technologies have to be on the table. There's just no question about it. If you take anything off the table, success is that much further away. The problem is that many governments have set these very arbitrary targets for one technology or another. They say renewables have to be 20% or 30% or something like that. And our analysis shows that this is really the wrong way to look at it. What we have seen is that in every economy, every country, that there's going to be a calculation that that country can make to understand what its resources are, how its grid is configured, and what the optimum mix between variable renewables and dispatchable resources should be if they're going to have a reliable and economic electricity system. This is something that we offer as a service to our members, but the real place this decision should be made is in the markets. And unfortunately, the markets are not configured to do this. The markets have failed us as a mechanism to make these decisions, and they have to be modernized. There's just no question about it. If we're going to be successful in the future, we have to have better markets. So if we do have the right markets, we are going to see that there's going to be a role for variable renewables. And in some places, it might be 40%. In other places, it might be higher. But there's always going to be, in our view, unless there's a dramatic change in technology, a role for dispatchable resources. And if you're talking about reducing carbon and you want to have large-scale, reliable electricity, your only real choice today is nuclear energy. There's really no question about that. In that respect, we think this is why the time is now. Because if we're going to be able to meet these decarbonization targets that countries have set for themselves, we have to know what the technologies are, not 20 years from now or 30 years from now, but really within the next decade. So if 5 years from now, say, you don't know what technologies you have available, there's probably very little prospect of getting the plants designed, built, and in operation in time to have an impact on 2050. It just takes that much time. Fortunately, we have, as you heard from the CEOs, a whole range of technologies are now on a drawing board or being developed that approach this. Advanced reactors, Gen 3 plus reactors, Gen 4 reactors, and these are technologies that are very exciting. Some of the small modular reactors are particularly of interest to us because they do provide a different model, a new way of looking at the electricity system, and more flexible, can be deployed in many different ways. But more important for me as a former regulator, they also provide tremendous safety benefits. The safety performance of some of these technologies is such that, and we've heard the conversation, that perhaps we no longer need offsite emergency preparedness. That's a game changer. That's an absolute game changer, and it's one that opens up the nuclear market for countries that in the past would never have considered it. However, and I think this question was asked by the CEOs, and one got the answer right, I think it was Patrick, and that is, what are the challenges to being global? Well, in our view, in our analysis, if these technologies are going to be successful, they have to have access to a global market. And we look at the analogy of the airline industry, the aircraft industry rather. And Boeing does not build an airplane just for the U.S. market. Boeing builds an airplane for the global market. And I think that these suppliers have to look at their business the same way. But the difference is that with Boeing builds an airplane for the world market, it knows what the regulatory footprint looks like. If you're a nuclear vendor, you don't. And if it turns out that regulators make different requirements for these technologies in every market, we will have failed. It will not succeed. We will not be able to make this work. So there has to be a way of harmonizing. There has to be a way for cooperation. And as Secretary Baranwal knows, we at the NEA are working on this right now to try to find a way to enable countries to work together to make deployment on a global scale possible. So let me just conclude with just a thought. And that is that as we think about this and we think about the urgency behind this, we have to also look at the fact that there are many people in the world that think that the only way to achieve these environmental goals is to simply use less electricity. And so they advocate, and not just electricity, but energy. So they advocate perhaps giving up your car and riding a bicycle. And of course, you remember the famous story about maybe taking a sailboat across the ocean instead of flying. And there's also people that suggest that perhaps people who live in developing countries where they're trying to pull people out of poverty and make sure that children have good health care and clean water, that maybe some of those objectives have to be pushed back a bit to save the environment. If that is the story, then we will fail because people will not stand for it. People will not give up civilization. They will not give up economic development to save the environment. It just simply won't happen. So this is where nuclear plays a big role. Nuclear gives us the opportunity of eating our cake and having it too. It gives us the opportunity to save the environment at the same time that we proceed to have reliable electricity for the future, for our children, for the next generation. So with that, I thank all of you for today's conversation and look forward to the next phase of the session.
Thank you so much, Director General Magwood. I've known you a long time. I've never seen you speak with so much passion. So we really appreciate your remarks today. Next, I would like to invite Deputy Director General Chudikoff to the stage, our virtual stage, and he is the Deputy Director General at the IAEA and also the head of nuclear. Deputy Director Chudikoff, I want to thank you so much. I know that you left the proceedings at the General Conference to come and join us, and we are grateful for your time. And I know that you also may need to leave us after your remarks, but if you're able to stick around for the closing discussion after, we'll invite you to join us.
Thank you, Alicia. Can you hear me well? Yeah, okay. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be with you today to talk on this timely and very important topic. I believe we can all agree that nuclear power has a role to play in meeting the global development and climate change goals. This week, we held a scientific forum on the margins of the 64th IAEA General Conference on the topic of nuclear power and the clean energy transition. Some of you, the panelists of this event, made valuable contribution to the forum. Over 1,500 participants joined the 2 days event, mainly virtually. The main message of the scientific forum was this: for nuclear power to play a key role in decarbonizing the energy sector, scientific and technological innovation is crucial. Ladies and gentlemen, the time for innovation is now. Nuclear power provides 10% of the world's electricity. 2 years ago, its share was 11%. To enable development, yet mitigate climate change, we should be going in the opposite direction. We should be increasing the share of nuclear in the global energy mix, not decreasing it. To do that, we will need to work hard. Last week, the agency released our latest projection for nuclear power electrical capacity through 2050. The low-case scenario suggests global nuclear generating capacity will fall by 7% to 363 gigawatts by mid-century. In the high-case scenario, however, it increases by 82% to 715 gigawatts. But achieving that high case will require immediate and concerted action. It will also require innovation. The good news is that innovation is happening now. Milestones are being reached in nuclear technology deployment. There are 72 small modular and micro-reactor designs under development in the world, representing all the major technology lines. The academic Lomonosov floating power unit with 2 KLT-40S modular reactors started commercial operation in May 2020 in the Russian Federation. 2 more SMRs are in the advanced stage of construction and expected to start operation between 21 and 23 in China and Argentina, respectively. At least 10 SMRs designed are planned to be deployed to start construction as the first of a kind unit by 2030. What is the role of the agency, IAEA? The agency provides a platform for countries to collaborate on advanced and innovative designs. Both countries considering their first nuclear power plant and those with an existing nuclear power program. Let me give you examples. One of the mechanisms we have in place are REACH projects, where we bring together research institutions from developing and developed member states to collaborate on topics of common interest. We have a total of about 150 such research projects involving about 1,600 research institutions. About 1/4 of these projects are related to nuclear energy. We provide a forum for member states to talk about innovation in design safety assessment and site evaluation, but also financing and infrastructure development. Last year, through our meetings with the experts from member states, we conducted 2 major studies on the benefits and challenges of fast reactors of the SMR type and on structural materials for heavy liquid metal cooled fast reactors. We run the Advanced Reactor Information System, ARIS, a database that provides a balanced, comprehensive, and current information about advanced nuclear power plant designs and concepts. It includes reactors of all sizes and all types, from SMRs and evolutionary nuclear power plant designs for the near-term deployment to innovative reactor concepts still under development. We have just recently released our so-called SMR booklet, a supplement to ARIS, which reports on the current advances in the technology development of SMRs and micro-reactors. Our SMR regulatory forum works on a tailor-made solution to help national authorities regulate this new class of nuclear power reactors. The agency also organized exchange of information and experience related to non-electric application of nuclear energy. These activities focus on the role of nuclear hydrogen production as part of the whole hydrogen supply chain and life cycle, different aspects of nuclear cogeneration project, the deployment of nuclear cogeneration using SMRs and high-temperature gas-cooled reactors, the role of nuclear desalination in the context of climate change mitigation. Ladies and gentlemen, innovation can help ensure that nuclear power continues to respond to rising global energy demand. But for that to happen, coordination of member states' efforts on a large scale is critical. Bilateral and multilateral cooperation can effectively propel advanced nuclear technology towards commercial demonstration. They will continue to support its member states in those efforts. And to conclude, let me again make a reference to our published energy, electricity, and nuclear power estimate for the period up to 2050. And here you can see projection in Northern America. This is the USA and Canada. So we can see in the high projection, it's the same, even lower, that only just a small compensation of retirement nuclear power plant, the commission, and in the low case, it's 3 times lower. This is even no compensation of retirement. So, honorable ladies and gentlemen, why we all talking about the priority of U.S. in nuclear innovation? Russia construct 25 units, 1,200 megawatt electrical in 9 countries, and started operation of floating SMR in the northern part. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, let's stop talking. Let's just go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DDG Tudikov. I really appreciate it. Are you able to stick around with us for 10 more minutes?
Yes. I will.
Okay, perfect. So, Patrick, why don't we bring in our other guest who will wrap us up, Dr. Baranwal, Mr. Magwood, as well as Dr. Reinke. Our guest will provide a wrap-up based on what we've all heard today and close us out so that we can end our event with their thoughts on what they've heard and why the time is now. And Dr. Baranwal, since you're already up and ready to go, why don't you start us off?
Great. Thank you, Alicia. And thank you to all my friends today for their comments. I loved the enthusiasm. I'll echo what Alicia said. It's a very exciting time for our industry right now. But in the words of Deputy Director General Tudikov, let's stop talking and just go ahead. And so let's keep moving. Let's build on the momentum that we have built over the past several years, especially in the United States. Let's leverage the bipartisan support that we have for nuclear energy right now, and let's continue to market the product that has always delivered clean energy in this time when clean energy is so desperately needed by the entire world. And so very much look forward to continuing to work with you and continuing to have these conversations. But let's just do it. Let's move.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baranwal. Dr. Reinke, from you, please.
Well, thanks. I'd just like to echo what Dr. Baranwal just said. I think you heard passion across all of the participants today, which is really exciting. I'm thinking back to, 9 years ago, and 9.5 years ago, we're approaching the 10-year mark from Fukushima, right? And there was a lot of worry. I think the old adage in the nuclear community is an accident anywhere is an accident everywhere. And that's true because of the impact on how people perceive nuclear. Today in this country, you're seeing a renewed resurgence of people who are looking at nuclear for the first time with fresh eyes, supporting nuclear, which is great. I think what's interesting about today's conversation is you've heard about lots of intricate details, the complications around getting technology developed, getting it to market, getting it deployed around the world, and how we're trying to take a holistic view, work together through public-private partnerships and move forward. It's very appropriate today that the IAEA is helping to host this event. It's the Department of Energy talking about U.S. nuclear, but as a side event to the IAEA, because in fact there is no other industry that has the type of regulatory structure, as Bill Magwood said earlier, right? That there are challenges in the international marketplace, nor the type of cooperation, frankly, on the peaceful use of nuclear power like we see through the IAEA. So thank you to Director Chudakov for your leadership here and for what the IAEA brings to the table, because NEA, IAEA, you're important conveners of the conversation around nuclear to help move the conversation forward globally. And as we look to deploy the technologies under development in the U.S., the things that we're working on at the Department of Energy, it is important that we take a global stance in partnership with our other peer nations. And with that, I think it's also appropriate for us to consider the challenge faced in expanding the number of deployments of nuclear globally, right? To be able to get through that type of development of safe, peaceful uses, the knowledge base that's required. In so many ways, it harkens back to the Atoms for Peace program and speeches that kicked all this off in the first place. So with that, I'd just like to say, a little plug and advertisement for, I think, a continuation of this conversation on a larger scale will be around this time next year, which is really exciting. In October 2021, in the U.S., we're going to have the first ever IAEA International Ministerial Conference on Nuclear Power held in the Western Hemisphere. And I think that's indicative of the passion that you're seeing across the industry folks that talk today, the ability that they are bringing to this challenge, and the way that we're looking at nuclear as, again, an expanded global market. So I, again, echo all those sentiments that were provided today. It is time to go. Let's get up and move. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the plug, Dr. Ranke, and we appreciate your help today with the panel. Mr. Magwood, please, your thoughts.
Well, let me pick up where Secretary Ranke left off. I think it's very clear that unlike other industries, we don't sell mobile phones. Government has to have a strong role in both the development of these technologies and ultimately in the relationship with other governments to make their deployment a possibility. If governments don't cooperate very closely, there's going to be a failure. We're not going to be able to be successful in deploying these technologies. And the private sector cannot be left on its own to do this. This just isn't going to work. So one of the things, and of course, DDG Chudakov and I, we do this for a living. We bring these governments together to try to cooperate, to make progress in these areas. But I have to say, it's harder now than it used to be. There is a lot of difficulty in the international framework of bringing countries together, and it's harder than it used to be. But we're not giving up. We're going to continue to try to pull the right people together, the right governments together, in order to try to solve these problems on a global basis. Because if we don't solve them on a global basis, they're not going to get solved, and we're not going to be successful. So I really appreciate the leadership from the Department of Energy and other U.S. institutions, and also, of course, our friends at the IAEA for helping to pull these conversations together. And let me thank you, Alicia, for organizing this discussion, because I think this is exactly the kind of conversation we need to highlight these important issues.
Thank you so much, Director General Magwood. I want to share that thanks with my co-organizer, Michelle Scott, who will close us out shortly. But before we do that, DDG Chudakov, if we could have your final thoughts on this as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me and for a nice, very great conversation. And of course, we appreciate that USA for hosting that next year Ministerial Conference on Nuclear Power in the 21st century in Washington, D.C. It will be a great event. And of course, that the most important is, I absolutely agree with everybody that the most important is government involvement and the stakeholder involvement and public involvement. Public must decide that what they're afraid more, changing of climate or just afraid in the nuclear power. And for nuclear power, we need also to put the right question, as it was said during our conference. I liked it very much. That if we are asking, somebody told that if you are asking in USA people that do you support the nuclear power that for the energy, they say 40% support. If you're asking, do you support the nuclear power that for the new energy, modernized after Chernobyl and Fukushima, that safe, secure, non-proliferational, and the coping with climate change, we receive an 80%. We always need to put the right question. And if you ask people that do you like nuclear power with Chernobyl and Fukushima, you receive 0 or even minus it. That we need to rule and to put the right question for the public in order to get the majority and the right answer on our question. So thank you again for giving me opportunity to participate in this great conversation. Thanks.
Which was a draw away. Thank you. All right. So that will allow us to wrap up, and I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Michelle Scott. And while we're making that transition with those on the video, I do want to thank those behind the scenes who help us execute such a flawless event, Patrick and Anusha, and the support that we've had from Mark and Armando. Thank you all. So now with that, could we please turn it over to Michelle Scott for the conclusion?
Thank you. I'm Michelle Scott from the Office of Nuclear Energy, and just to echo some of the sentiments that have occurred, a lot of great things, and yes, we do need to act now, and by acting now, we just want to move forward and continue this conversation. This conversation allowed for a number of different streams to be raised, and we have the opportunity to continue having these conversations and working with the NEA, the IEA, and member countries. That being said, to close the session out, I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers for a very engaging views as well as dialogue, and we will continue to keep this effort going and through this momentum, as well as Dr. Rinke said, we will have another opportunity to engage again at this level, as well as staff level at the Nuclear Power Ministerial here in the U.S. again next year in October. So everyone have a great day, and thank you.
Thank you. Bye.